Welcome back, everybody, yet again to another game developer interview courtesy of Game Devs of Color Expo 2023. Don't call it a comeback. I'm the host of this interview, the Purple Sharpie, but you can call me Sharpie if you're feeling especially simulated today. I happen to be here with three members from one of the newer game developer studios out there, Visionaries. I'd love to introduce founder as well as the game designer of the company, Kunal. How are you doing today, Kunal?
I'm doing great, Sharpie. Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here. I also have Busayo, who is the lead writer as well as the marketing and communications lead. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Finally, last but not least, we have Matawe, who is the game architect for a little-known engine called Unity on the team. How are you doing today, Matawe?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having us, Sharpie.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Now, finally, we have to go back over to Kunal to hear a little bit about the project we'll be speaking about today, Business Heroes.
Sure. Business Heroes Food Truck Simulation takes you through the adventure of starting and running a food truck business. It's a turn-based strategy game where you make most of your strategic decision at night and watch the impact simulate during the day. The game, it takes you through the whole business journey from meeting the need of your people, developing recipes, pricing, marketing, and ensuring that your associates are happy most of the time, while you navigate through unforeseen challenges a business would face.
Thanks so much for that very apt synopsis of the game. While we take a break to go visit the food truck, why don't we go ahead and run the trailer?
Business Heroes, food truck simulation, a fun and brain-teasing strategy game. Your mission? Turn a tiny burger bike into a massive food truck empire. To make your business bloom and survive, you'll need to cook up super yummy burgers. Keep track of your supplies, staff, and money. Upgrade with cool equipment and spread your trucks all over town. But watch out. You'll have to tackle bad weather, events, and money problems. Master Lee, the richest and funniest entrepreneur ever, is looking for someone to take his place. Could that be you? Before we launch on Steam, we'll be testing the game. Want in? Add the game to your wish list and join our Discord group. Be a part of the adventure.
What an enterprising trailer, to say the least. I actually want to go over to you, Busayo. Inside of the gameplay, even though there's not currently a demo available, we had opportunities to see inside of both that trailer and several different showcases available on your YouTube about the enterprising tooltips and characterizations that we see inside of the game. There are a plethora of different social classes and different NPCs that the player can interact with while they're running their business. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the importance of the relatively punny tooltips in addition to the NPC personality that we see coming through?
Okay, so I'll divide that into two, right? So there are the characters, the NPCs, and then the role of the tooltips. So for the characters, we wanted to provide as much of a realistic experience as we could for players while they're going through their entrepreneurship adventure, their virtual entrepreneurship adventure, right? So we decided to craft customers that represented different segments, customer segments that entrepreneurs would probably meet in real life. So we have students, we have like parents, we have influencers, and these are not just titles, right? They have special characteristics. Like the students, they don't have much money, they're in school, right? So their taste and preferences for a burger isn't as refined or isn't as what's the word, high profile?
High maintenance, no. Yeah.
High maintenance as like managers, right? So if as an entrepreneur, when you start your business, right, they're like an easy segment to target because their needs aren't, their needs aren't too high. You can easily satisfy them. But on the other end of the spectrum, on the other end of the scale, we have like managers who they're very detailed. They have specific requirements for your food stand. They just don't come and buy food from just any food stand, right? So that's how we designed the characters. So it's a progression, right? As you grow your business, you polish your business, you acquire more stuff, you can serve better customers and then make a lot more money. Then for the tooltips, because it's a business game, we wanted to try and make it as accessible, right, for anyone, right? So we try to include detailed explanations for nearly all the terms in the game. So for most stuff, you can just hover on it and then you understand what it is really. So that was the goal for the tooltips. We're pretty big on accessibility. We want as many players as possible across age groups, right, to have as much fun and entertainment as they embark on their virtual adventure.
For sure. You know, accessibility is really, really important inside of games. And as we find out and see more and more and more games come onto the market, accessibility is the one thing setting apart okay projects from really, really good projects. So obviously, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the UI and UX redesign that you all went through briefly a few months ago. You have publicly spoken about it. You have videos up about it on your Steam page and your YouTube page. And I actually want to go over to Kunal and then very briefly to Matawe. Kunal, I'd like to first ask you about why was there a need for a UI UX design? I know Busayo very briefly spoke about how accessibility is important, and that was a large aspect going into the redesign, but were there any other factors that went into it?
Yes, user experience. We realized while developing the game and implementing all the complex mechanics, it's very hard to convey those mechanics to our players. And in order to get that across, we need a UI that is simple enough to hold those complex mechanics and convey it to our players. So we had to redo the UI 4 times. At the same time, we are redesigning the user experience itself, which meant we had to redesign the game itself, right? How certain mechanics will be revealed to the player later on and hidden from them at the beginning because it's too complex or there'll be too much for them to assimilate. We really want to have a very deep simulation, but we realized while we did playtest that we can't reach to that level from the start of the game. We need to get the player to understand the basics first and then introduce more complex mechanics as they go through the game. So over the past 2.5 years, we redesigned the UI 4 times, as I mentioned. The first time was for accessibility mainly, and then the next 2 times, after we got feedback from our testers, we tried to make it a more fun and engaging experience rather than a chore, where you have to go and specifically learn a game, which is quite hard nowadays when you have new complex games like Paradox games. It's heavy for the users to get into.
So coming out of that redesign had to be very difficult, not just for the team, but specifically, I assume, for Matawe, who is the lead game architect for the studio. Matawe, I actually want to ask you, how were you able to handle the change of scope from that UI UX design, and how did you manage to process that need for change in order to accompany the project's vision?
Because we are community driven and we take a lot of our requirements from the playtest, and it's expected to change a lot, it is very challenging to the architecture side and to the design side to keep options open and to remain agile in terms of taking new requirements and trying to adapt the game to this change. As Kunal mentioned, we went through several redesigns, and this wouldn't have been possible without maintaining a level of modularity where you handle the components like you handle Legos, like plug and pluggable components and try to maintain each component separately. So yeah, it of course also translates to extended development times because it comes at a cost to have things modular at this level. Yeah.
I understand that this game was also created inside of Unity. Did you feel like Unity really lent itself to an easier method towards some of the UI and UX design?
I would say so. You have in Unity the freedom of working with object-oriented, all methodologies with object-oriented to keep and maintain the architecture open for changes. And yeah, it was very easily to create prototypes with minimal requirements and then iterate on that over and over, growing the modules separately. Yeah.
You know, I'm really happy that you all did ultimately go through the UI UX design, and I do highly, highly recommend for any interested gamers out there to visit their YouTube and their Steam page, where they do actually go into a very, very in-depth and transparent change list of the things that they opted to go ahead and change. I do applaud everyone at the studio for being very, very transparent. And Matawe, I actually think you said it the best. You all are very, very, very community driven. Kunal, I actually want to go over to you for this very next question. Obviously, with this being your very first project, the game that kind of cements the studio of visionaries inside of the vision of the general gaming public, how important was it that the community's voice mattered? And how important is it to you that inside of the world of business simulation and management games alike, you are able to set yourself apart?
Right. So in terms of importance, I always tell it to my team, player feedback is gold. Everything else doesn't matter. That's the philosophy of the studio. That's how we're driven. We have a list of all the feedback we received since day one. We released the game to our playtesters and our community members, and we keep track. We review the list over and over again, and we make sure we understand what the players are trying to tell us when they highlight any issues, and we address that. That's very important for us because we are making game for our players. We really want players to have fun when they're playing the game. So if we don't listen to them, then there's no point of making the game. That's how I feel. So yeah, I think that is very valuable in two ways. One, all of us, we are learning. We are learning what players are looking for, what they like, and what are the best ways to make our next game, right? So while going through this journey, we are getting so much value by making the game itself and by communicating with our audience. It's a great experience.
Kunal, I do have a couple of follow-up questions, and they are inside of the vein of game design. So if you need to bounce some questions off Matawe, feel free. But the very first question that I actually have is specifically about the simulated economic conditions. Currently inside the United States of America, there is a very active recession that a lot of people are feeling after the pandemic. Internationally is even more widespread concern regarding recessions and general just wealth disparity as it pertains to at the midst of the coronavirus destroying a lot of healthcare systems. Inside of this game, we have simulated economic conditions, several of which do accommodate different things such as depressions, recessions, and even economic booms. But more importantly, you do also have random events that occur throughout the entirety of the business's lifespan. I'd love to talk to you more about the mentality that went into creating something that simulated the real life economic situations that a player may find themselves in.
Right. So we, as I mentioned, we really want to build this simulation to be as close as possible to real life, but fun. So what we've done, we've compressed a 10-year economic cycle into a year where you have an economic boom and a downfall, and sometimes you will have recession and depressions. That will be triggered by the events. So during that period, what will happen? The population, first, there'll be less of them out on the street because they don't have enough money to spend, and their spending will be their spending habit will be different based on the current economic. So we have something called economic happiness in the game, where If your economic happiness is high, you won't mind paying slightly more for a burger than when your economic happiness is low, because then you want to save. Like what's happening right now, most people would want to eat at home because they don't want to spend out on burgers or expensive burgers, right? So there'll be less people coming to your food trucks. That's one aspect in the game that we really put a lot of effort in. The other one is we cover 15 different countries, and they all have different, I would say, economic cycles. Their GDP is different. The number of people in that country is different. So if you play South Korea, for example, you would you would progress faster than if you started in Canada or right now in the US. It's a little bit harder. So in some way, selecting the country that you're starting your business in will influence the difficulty of the game.
I do have one final follow-up question that I'd love to talk about in that exact same vein. The country that you pick as a starting point is obviously very important, not exclusively for economic purposes, but also for environmental purposes. Inside of the game, there are several different weather conditions that can be either relatively mild or even more exacerbated based upon the starting location of where you choose to start inside of that country or city, in addition to also just general climate change. Why did you opt to put weather conditions inside of the game? And I'd actually like to go over to Matoe really quickly to talk about how that was designed inside of Unity.
Right. So a food truck business, I'm here in the desert, and during summertime, you can't see any food truck that's open. That's because it's 40 degrees or 45 degrees, and no one will be queuing outside waiting for a food truck. And if you go to Alaska during the winter, there'll be no one outside waiting for a burger if it's like minus 12 degrees. So we wanted to have this in the game. Since you're in different countries, the weather would be different throughout the year. And since nowadays you have more, I would say, there are cyclonic weather, tornadoes, and all those different elements that can affect your business, and we wanted our players to face the same difficulties that they would probably face in the real world, and it adds a level of challenge and unpredictability into the game, which is quite fun. You know, suddenly you go to work and you realize, oh, it's raining, it's raining a lot, and there's no one outside. When the weather predicted that it's going to be raining a little bit, you know, some things like that will really increase the engagement of the player, and you know, increase the fun, I would say.
So for the final question inside of this interview, I actually want to go over to Matoe to discuss some of the use of Unity to add in those weather cycles inside of the game. Can you talk to me about what that process looked like?
Of course. So as I mentioned earlier, having the game designed as modules, it enables adding or removing different modules that would affect the core financial loop or the gameplay. Having the weather conditions is one of these pluggable components. You can work with this as the same way that you can add other factors like time of the day. You can add the random events, and all of these are external components that would affect the core financial modules. And this is how they can design to be activated, deactivated, changed with, we can change their impact, severeness, and values, and manipulate their impact basically on the game. Yeah.
Matawe, I want to thank you so much for a very transparent look behind the curtain for the game. And I'd love to thank all three of you, Kunal, Basayo, and Matawe, for your time today and a look inside of the newest game developing company on the block, Visionaries. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Sharpie.
Thank you so much for having us. This was fun.
It was fun. And viewer, if you had fun, you can join in too. Make sure that you go over to businessheroes.cool to either pre-order the game or wishlist it on Steam right now. Make sure you also join the Discord to keep up with all the latest inside of the development cycle for the newest game developing company on the block, Visionaries. That's going to do it for this game developer interview, but stay tuned because we have even more Game Devs of Color Expo 2023 coming up right now.